is he doomed to be the next Dan Marino? Dan Marino, who's arguably the best quarterback to never win a Super Bowl. Set all these records, was always seen as, during his playing days, as like a top 5 quarterback in the sport. Maybe at the very, very end he wasn't, but
he stunk at the end. He couldn't
move.
The
majority of his career.
Yeah.
He was, when you mentioned the great quarterbacks, he was one of them.
Yep.
But only played in one Super Bowl, never won one. Is Josh Allen doomed to that fate?
All right, so let me ask you this, because you're going to help me out with the 80s history more than I can do. Because my wife and I were talking about this very topic over lunch. She was asking, hey, what are you guys doing on the show today? And I mentioned this.
Was she painted like half green, half silver in her face?
That'll be next Sunday.
Okay.
Because she said, I actually think your comparison, your being mine, of him to Peyton Manning is the better one, but that's mainly because he is in the same conference as the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Manning was in the same conference as Brady. And so I use that as a way of asking you this. Was like Marino's playoff failures, were they because he was running into like these awesome teams or this awesome quarterback? Because memory serves me that, the guy was in the NFC and that guy's name was Joe Montana.
Mm-hmm.
The AFC, it's kind of a hodgepodge, right? Of the Patriots randomly make it to a Super Bowl. The Raiders are going to a Super Bowl or two in the 80s, if I remember right.
Yeah,
the Broncos, John Elway obviously was around and going to Super Bowls. Like, why did Marino fail in the postseason? Because I think Josh Allen fails because he runs into Patrick Mahomes.
Well, see, that's because he was on the Dolphins, and the Dolphins suck in the postseason.
That's true.
But if memory serves, I don't know if Dan Marino ever faced John Elway in a playoff game.
No way. Really?
I'm trying to remember if the Dolphins ever played the Broncos in a playoff game and I don't think they did.
That's like a legitimate bummer because that's two of the best quarterbacks.
Let me take a look here. Playoffs. They maybe.
John, you are right. Here's who they lost to in the 80s. They lost to the Chargers. They lost in the Super Bowl, of course, to Washington. They lost to the Seahawks, who were in the AFC at the time. They lost, of course, to the 49ers in the Super Bowl. They lost in that AFC championship game. Thus, they were not the sacrificial lambs of the 85 Bears. They missed the playoffs in 86, missed them in 87, missed them in 88, missed them in 89.
I mean, if there was a quarterback or a team that got in their way, it was Jim Kelly and the Bills. They lost to them for 3 different occasions.
Yeah. But by that point, that's late stage Dan Marino.
Correct.
Yeah,
he never ran into John Elway. And when you played in the AFC back then, you never won a Super Bowl anyway. But remember, he only made one.
How the hell did
Josh Allen hasn't made any yet?
How the hell did the Dolphins lose to the Patriots that year in the AFC Championship game? They got skunked.
You know what the amazing thing about that was?
What in the world?
The Dolphins had like an 18-game Orange Bowl winning streak against the Patriots going into that championship game.
How did they lose? Oh my gosh, here's why. 6 Dolphins turnovers.
Yeah. It was a wet, rainy day.
24 points for the Patriots.
And it was a real letdown because the Dolphins were the one team that bettered the Bears, and they would have gotten a chance. The Bears would have had a rematch, but instead the Patriots ruined it. And
that's wild.
Of course, Chicago curb stomped New England.
It was bad.
Just left him out on the side of the road.
Yeah, so that's why, to answer it, I think he is more this generation's Peyton Manning. But again, to go back to the corollary, Manning also had to break through.
Manning did break through, and that's the thing.
But it took him a while.
It did take a while.
But
I wonder, because remember, you got 2 guys out there who were waiting for the breakthrough.
Correct.
It's not, and really, we could say a third. You got Burrow.
And he's the one guy who's done it.
And he's the one guy who's actually made a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Didn't win, famously. But I don't know. I think.
See, I do think the Manning comp, so here's what his career started in 98, bad. 1999, they were 13-3 and they lost their first playoff game. The next year they were 10-6, they lost their first playoff game. That was a road game. They missed the playoffs in 01. That was the famous playoffs here. Playoffs? And then they hired Dungy. They go to the playoffs. They lose 41-0 to the Jets. Horrible, horrible game. Then in 03, they finally break through and make an AFC title game, lose to the Patriots. The next year, they get to the divisional round against the Patriots, lose again. Then they start off like 13-0 or 12-0. They're the 1 seed. 14-2, lose to the Steelers in the divisional round. Like, I really do think that the comp is
idiot kicker.
Oh yeah, that was that very game. And then the next year they were a wild card team and they ended up going to the Super Bowl and they won the Super Bowl against the Bears. Like, you know, when I picked the Bills last week, there was one listener who was like, "Why are you picking the Chiefs or why are you picking against them? We all know how this is going to go because this is what happens. They always win." And it's like, yes, they do until they don't. Like, I had the same reverence for those Patriots teams. Every year it was like, nah, I kept picking Manning to break through, and then he didn't. And at a certain point, it was like, I kind of gave up on it happening, and that was when they finally broke through, you know?
So maybe you're still holding out hope.
He's so good. I can't imagine that he's not able to do so. Just like Peyton Manning was so good. Like now, in hindsight, it seems so obvious that they were going to break through.
People not have that same feeling about Lamar?
See, but I do. I also have the same. I think both of those guys are still going to be able to do it because in that era, Roethlisberger broke through and Manning broke through. You know, now I think Manning is better than Allen. I think Lamar is better than Roethlisberger. And, you know, Mahomes is what he is. Like I do think it happens. Again, in hindsight, it was so obvious that the Colts were going to win a Super Bowl because of course they were. They had Peyton Manning. In the moment though, I mean, after that Jets loss, for example, it was bad. 41-0. That Steelers, the idiot kicker, like that team, you know, that was one of those classic seasons. If this version of the Colts can't do it, can.
True.
You know, and it ended up being, in my opinion, of that era.
And it's possible.
It's one of the lesser Colts teams.
It's certainly possible. But you do have to start to wonder if it's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's easy right now because it's literally one roadblock. It's one roadblock.
Though he has also lost to the other guy you mentioned in this conversation, in Joe Burrow. Maybe that's where you got to figure out where Burrow fits in this discussion.
Yeah.
See, but he plays, you know, I've been bitching about my franchise this forever, but recently with the lack of money they spend, a team that does not spend money is the the Cincinnati Bengals. No. They are cheap. And so that is going to be quite the wrinkle in this, you know, who's going to break through because the Colts were willing to spend money. The Steelers were willing to spend money of that era. You know, the Ravens were a competent organization and they broke through.
Yeah.
And then when Manning went to the Broncos, they knew that they had a short, finite window and they were willing to spend money. And they did it. And they all broke through and won Super Bowls. I still very much believe in the institutional knowledge or the institution of the Ravens. I very much think the Bills can. Of course, the Chiefs are there. Cincinnati is the one team where it's like, ugh. I don't know if they'll be able to.